Aside from starting Mitchell Trubisky over Nick Foles, there are few ways to make a fool of yourself faster in sports than making predictions. So with that in mind, here are mine for week 1 of the 2020 NFL season. By the way, if you do find yourself enjoying this video for whatever reason, whether you just like watching me make a fool of myself, or you actually think I know what I'm talking about for some reason, the subscribe button is down there. 2020 is already pretty likely to be the most unpredictable NFL season that we've ever seen, especially considering we didn't even get a preseason to see how these teams look coming into the new year. And on top of that, week 1 is almost always the most unpredictable week of any NFL season. But that's certainly not going to stop me from telling you who is definitely going to win each one of these games. And although I wasn't quite able to find the time to get this video out before Thursday's game, I am already 1 for 1 on the season. Although that being said, I think pretty much everyone was picking the Chiefs, so it is what it is. Going into Thursday's game, I had the Chiefs beating the Texans 35-27 in what I expected to be a shootout, and if you're going to go into a shootout, it's usually best to have the best weapons. And while I do have to admit that David Johnson looked a lot better than I was expecting him to, even against a seemingly improved Chiefs defense, he still very much got outshined by rookie running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire for the Chiefs. And outside of that, while for the most part Watson did still look like one of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL, it was very clear that he could have definitely used some more talent at receiver. Like, for example, I don't know, maybe DeAndre Hopkins. And while the final score did end up being pretty close to what I had going into the game with a 34-20 finish, it really wasn't that close of a game. The Chiefs were very clearly the better team. And I think in the eyes of most after that game, very much looked like the team to beat in the AFC coming off of their Super Bowl victory. For the Texans, things don't get a lot easier next week as they will have the Ravens. Meanwhile, the Chiefs will travel to LA to play the Chargers in what will be an empty stadium. Although this time it'll be because of COVID and not for any other reasons. So now let's get to the games that haven't happened yet. And we start with the Bills and Jets, where one of these teams is very clearly better on defense, and one of these teams is also very clearly better on offense. Unfortunately for the Jets, both of those teams are the Bills. I have Buffalo winning 24-10. With Green Bay traveling to Minnesota, these are the two best teams in the AFC North, and while I did pick the Green Bay Packers to win, this is a stadium that in their history they've had trouble winning in, although it's not going to have fans this time, so who knows how much of that had to do with the crowd noise. But again, while I do have the Packers winning this division, I think I'm going to take the Vikings in week 1 winning 20-14. Week 1 tends to go to the teams that are stronger on defense, which I definitely think is the Vikings in this case, but it will be interesting to see how they manage without Stephon Diggs in that offense. With Philadelphia facing off against the Washington football team, it will be interesting to see DC in their new uniforms. Although that being said, they did go from the most offensive name to definitely the least possible offensive name they could have thought of. But aside from those new uniforms, and I guess a new head coach and how long it takes the franchise to ruin Dwayne Haskins, there really isn't anything else interesting about this team, and the Eagles are going to have their way in DC, winning 24-6. With Cleveland and Baltimore, we know that both of these teams are extremely talented, and one of them showed it last year while the other one managed to continue that unpredictability of week 1 throughout the entirety of the season. And if there is a team in this league that can just as easily go 6-10 as they can go 10-6, it is the Cleveland Browns, so we really have no idea what to expect from them. Meanwhile, with the Ravens, it'll be fun to see whether or not Lamar Jackson can continue what he did last year. If he can, the Ravens are set up to once again make a run for the Super Bowl. But if he does end up regressing to any significant degree, that does open up the door for the Steelers or this talented Browns team. But I still do have the Ravens winning this one, 28-20. With the Colts going to Jacksonville, the Jaguars might very well be the worst team in the NFL, but I still do think Gardner Minshew can do some special things for this team, and Phillip Rivers will probably still throw a pick 6 in this game. And for the Colts, it'll just be a win to get everybody in and out of Florida without catching the coronavirus. That having been said, they're still the better team even if they are somewhat mediocre, and they will win this game 27-21. Next up, we have the Las Vegas Raiders versus the Carolina Panthers. And look, the honest truth is that neither of these teams are particularly good, and while Carolina does have easily the best player on the field, they are more particularly not good, so I have the Raiders winning this 24-17. With the Bears versus the Lions, even though the Bears have a pretty good defense, you probably have a good idea from the opening what I think of their decision for a starting quarterback going into week 1. Also, on top of that, I think the Lions are a pretty decent team as long as Matt Stafford can stay healthy, so I've got the Lions winning this one, 24-13. Next up is Atlanta and Seattle, and the first Bird Bowl of the year. As a lifelong Seahawks fan, no one is more familiar than me with how the Seahawks typically start off their seasons. That having been said, this Seahawks offense is much better than this Falcons defense and should be able to put up a lot of points, even if they do wait until the second half to do so. However, on the other side of the ball, this is a very good Week 1 matchup for this newly revamped Seahawks secondary, especially against a Falcons team that still has quite a few good weapons and a good quarterback to get the ball to them. So if nothing else, we should get a pretty good feel of how this new Seahawks nickel defense looks, and we should get to see a lot of Jamal Adams. And as this will be the first test for that supposedly new look secondary and the revamped defense, I would expect to see a few mistakes and maybe some holes here and there. And if Atlanta wants to win this game, that is definitely what they're going to have to do, as it will have to be a high-scoring win if they're going to get there. That being said, I still have the Seahawks winning this one, 31-20. With Miami at New England, all eyes are going to be on the Patriots, and more specifically, Cam Newton, as everyone is going to want to see what a Tom Brady-less Patriots team really looks like. And look, even without Tom Brady, no one's feeling bad for the Patriots, and I think most people are going to be pulling for the Dolphins here. But I still don't expect the Patriots to fall off the face of the earth like everyone wants them to, including me. Meanwhile, this is still very much a rebuilding year and maybe even another tank year for the Dolphins, so I would expect the Patriots to win this one. But it'll probably be a sloppy game and not all that high scoring, so I'm going to go New England 17-7. With the Bengals hosting the Chargers, I really don't know what to expect from the Chargers, but I don't think it's going to be anything particularly good. That being said, I don't think the Bengals are going to be very good either, even with Joe Burrow. So ultimately, again, this is probably going to be a pretty sloppy game that's going to be about who makes the least mistakes. So I'm just going to go ahead and say Chargers 16-14. With the Cardinals versus the 49ers, assuming the smoke clears and this game can actually happen on time, this could be one of the most entertaining games of the weekend, with that Arizona offense being one of the most electric in the NFL, or at least it has the potential to be one of the most electric offenses in the NFL. That being said, the 49ers are still very much the better team, and while I do think that their weakness is on offense, Arizona still doesn't really have a defense, so I think the 49ers will win this one pretty safely. I don't know, 27-14. Next up is the game that everybody wishes was in primetime, but instead, it's just another one of the Sunday evening games. That being Tampa Bay going to New Orleans, and the first matchup of Brees versus Brady in the NFC South. Now look, the honest truth with Brees versus Brady is that both of these guys are very far from the primes of their careers, and showed a pretty noticeable amount of regression last season. But even at that, they are still both very good quarterbacks, and have some very good talent surrounding them on the offensive side of the ball. Fortunately for Brees and the Saints, on top of having what I think is the better of these two defenses, he also has what I think is the better supporting cast on offense, especially if Mike Evans misses week 1. But I still think this is going to be a pretty close and very exciting game to watch. I'm going to go Saints 28-24. Our first game of Sunday Night Football for the year pretty much is just there because they wanted to show off the fancy new stadium in LA, and because it's the Cowboys and they're always in prime time. Although, as much as it does pay me to say this, at least for the Cowboys this year, they are finally talented enough to be deserving of the number of slots they have on national TV. And to that point, the Rams better be able to have a very strong bounce back from last season if they want to keep up with the Cowboys in this game. But honestly, I just don't really see it happening. I've got the Cowboys winning this one 30-17. With the Steelers versus the Giants, I mean, I guess there's a handful of fun to watch players in this game. I mean, Saquon Barkley is for sure. But honestly, I just don't understand how this is one of the Monday night games. Honestly, the most interesting part of this game, unless you're a fan of one of these teams, or I guess a team in one of these teams' division, is whether or not ESPN can put together a commentating crew that is any better than anything we've gotten since Tirico and Gruden. But as for the game, I think Pittsburgh wins in some kind of weird fashion, so I don't know, 18-13. Unless, of course, this is the game that gets ESPN's B crew, in which case it'll definitely be interesting to hear what comes out of their mouths. And that possibility is brought to us by the always fun second Monday night game in week 1 of the NFL season, this time being Broncos vs. Titans. Someone like the Browns, I think both the Titans and Broncos could be very interesting teams to watch throughout the year, and could very well be competing for those wildcard spots in the AFC. That being said, all of those teams are also just as likely to go 8-8 or 7-9 and miss the playoffs entirely. So even though it is week 1, I do think that this game could have some pretty big implications in the AFC wildcard race. With that said though, the last week leading up to this game has definitely been a lot kinder to the Titans than it has to the Broncos, as while the Titans managed to sign Jadeveon Clowney, the Broncos lost Von Miller for the season. So now, even more so for the Broncos, this game, and really their season as a whole, will come down to the performance of young quarterback Drew Lock and whether or not he can perform at the level that people expect him to be able to. Ultimately though, those major changes on the defensive side and the fact that the Titans are a little bit more of a proven team at this point, I think will be too much for the Broncos to overcome in week 1, so I have the Titans winning 20-17. Alright, that will do it for my week 1 predictions, but I will be back next week to see if I got anything other than the Chiefs game right, and also to predict next week's games. Until then, if you think you know better than me, I'd love to see your predictions for week 1, or maybe just the year as a whole, down in the comments section below. Otherwise, as always, if you did make it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like this video, hit that like button down below, or maybe even hit subscribe. Otherwise, I hope to see you next time. Stay safe out there and be good to each other. Peace.